Today, Square Enix develops and publishes all sorts of games, but in the early 90s, most of their output consisted of role-playing games, with Final Fantasy being their flagship series, of course. In 1995, they tried their hand at the subgenre of strategy RPG with Front Mission. But while another series might have waited a while to make a spin-off game, Squaresoft made it only 1 year later, with 1996's Front Mission Gun Hazard. Unlike the first game, Front Mission Gun Hazard is a side-scrolling action game along the lines of Cybernator, but with a hefty dose of RPG elements and storyline thrown in. There's a lot of story in this game, even though it's mainly a side-scroller. Most of it consists of dialogue before and during missions, but while sometimes it feels like it's a bit much, other times it's woven into the gameplay rather nicely, and I just kinda like how it takes its time with it. The story seems somewhat complicated, but basically it's A, set in the future, and B, about war. The setting is Earth, and you can go to several locations on the world map, oddly enough including Bergen, Norway, where one of the game world's current superpowers is headquartered. You move around the map in some sort of ship, and you can go to any of the locations available to fight at which point the game turns into a side-scroller. Your mech suit, or Wanzer as it's called, controls great, while feeling like it has some weight to it, like a mech should. You shoot with Y and jump with B, but there's more, of course. You can block with the R button, punch with A, hold L to moonwalk, which also locks your aim into place, which can be helpful. While jumping, you can press B again to use thrusters for a short time to hover, and if you buy a dash unit in the shop, you can dash along the ground by pressing left or right twice quickly, and you can also buy alt weapons to use with the A button. If you don't have one, the default one is the punch, which is actually very useful. And like Blaster Master, you can exit your Wanzer with the select button and walk around, which isn't really recommended in typical battles, of course, but in some levels and scenarios you have to do it. And while on foot, you have infinite thrusting power and a small gun as your weapon. The gameplay of Front Mission Gun Hazard is entertaining, and I very much like all the customization options you have with your Wanzer, and the fact that you can level up, which does lead to some grinding, for better and for worse. It's not just your Wanzer level that will increase over time and usage, however, but also your weapons and equipment, sort of like Final Fantasy II, but done a lot better. Also, like any RPG, in the shop you can buy items that pretty much serve as potions to use on the battlefield. And when you use one, you can see your exact HP level too, unlike the health bar on top, which only gives you a rough sense. Another nice touch is that the game comes with an alarm when you have low health, which can be annoying, but you actually have the option to disable that here. The enemies seem to spawn rather than be placed. It seems like you're supposed to defeat a number of enemies in any given area before you can progress, rather than it being planned out like a standard action platformer would be. And when you clear a stage, it doesn't just end on its own. You have to stand under the exit sign and hit down and B. It's a little counterintuitive, and without knowing, it takes a while to figure out. At least it did for me. But now you know. The graphics are fantastic. Just lovely. They're detailed, colorful, and have a lot of added touches thrown in, like how the glare of the sunset goes behind the hills in the desert stage, the subtle snowfall in the mountains, and so on. It's a beautiful looking game, from one of the experts of the Super Famicom. Not to mention the artwork from Yoshitaka Amano. You can immediately tell from the box art that it's him, and his style works surprisingly well for this military theme. The game sounds great too, having had the one and only Nobuo Uematsu work on the soundtrack, as well as Chrono Trigger composer Yasunori Mitsuda. This doesn't focus on melodies too much really, but it sounds like a film score kind of, and complements the game at every turn. Front Mission Gun Hazard is a great game by Squaresoft, and it's too bad it was never localized, although I can understand it since it was released when the PlayStation was already out. But unfortunately, as far as I know, the game has never been re-released or ported since then. However, there does exist a translation patch made by fans.